I texted with the Trump team as they are sitting waiting for a jury verdict and just said, "Hey, does Trump want to call into the show?" And they shot back and said they don't want to do that while they're waiting, but they wanted to pass this message along from Trump himself to all of you. Rigged trial, corrupt judge, but I have the facts, all caps, on my side. Testimony conclusively showed that I clearly stated I don't buy stories, all caps. So that is from Trump himself as they sit waiting in the courthouse for this verdict to come back. We are joined now by a guy who knows the president pretty well, Kash Patel, and has also had to deal with a lot of this lawfare on many different levels. So let's start with the question that everybody is asking. What do you think this jury is thinking right now, Kash? How do you think they are going about their deliberations? Do you agree that the longer this goes on, potentially the better this could be for Trump? What should we know from your perspective as we sit here waiting to see what's going to happen?
Hey, it's great to be with you guys. And the best perspective you just got it was from President Trump himself. But from my chair as a former federal prosecutor and public defender who tried 60 of these cases to verdict in state and federal court and was with the president all day last week when the Costello testimony hit the stand, I saw jurors. I observed the jurors because that was my practice. They found Bob Costello with their mannerisms credible. I also watched the jurors when they were watching Michael Cohen lie through their teeth, and not a single one of the jurors would make eye contact with Michael Cohen, but they were all looking intently at Bob Costello. To me, from a credibility standpoint, that means the jury saw what we saw, what the world saw was the truth. But from that vantage point, and when you put them back in the jury room, it's a different story. They are looking now to see if there's anyone on there that's going to hold the line and find Donald Trump not guilty based on the facts and the law, or whether they're going to do what we call splitting the baby because he's charged with 34 counts. Are they going to say, let's just go home, we'll ask a few questions, we'll make it look like we did our jobs, and we'll convict him of one or two things so the Biden administration can have the headline that Donald Trump's a convicted felon? There's really no way to read it in terms of time back in the jury room.
Hey, Kash, it's Buck. Good to have you on as always. And drawing upon your time as a prosecutor in the past, have you ever seen anything like this? We mentioned it maybe earlier in the hour, where a prosecutor takes one alleged act, and I don't even like to say this is criminal because I don't even think it is, but put that aside, one alleged criminal act, and then just counts it dozens of times, the same thing, because of like Xerox machines and emails or something. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever seen this before?
No, never. It's not even that I haven't seen one of these acts before. It, to me, is astounding that I keep seeing so many unconstitutional acts in just one trial, whether it's the jury instructions, which were literally the first time I've ever heard that a verdict does not have to be unanimous. The Supreme Court has clearly established that every element of every crime charged must be unanimously found beyond a reasonable doubt in order to convict a defendant. Then you have the government, Alvin Bragg here, pasting together 34 times over a felony that they made up out of thin air, which they have no jurisdiction to do because they do not have the authority to govern FEC regulations and violations. Not to mention the fact that the FEC and the DOJ said Donald Trump did not commit those violations. But what they're hoping for is the throw everything against the wall prosecution and hope one piece of spaghetti sticks. And that's what you get when you have this sort of 34X rubber stamp prosecution. You hope to basically inflame the jurors so much to say, wow, 34 felonies. He must have done something wrong, so we got to find him guilty of at least one thing. That's their hope, but that's not the law.
Kash, couple of questions for you because you've got good experience in these matters. We were taking calls from listeners. One asked, okay, if there's a hung jury, how fast could they try Trump again? I'm curious what you've ever seen in terms of the turnaround on a rapid case like this. Second part, do you agree with me that this is a almost 100% certain case that's going to be reversed on appeal? And what do you think the strongest grounds for that reversal would be?
Yeah, look, in due course, you could go from a hung jury to a trial relatively quickly. But here in the details, we expose yet another corrupt activity by this judge. This judge has Steve Bannon's case. This judge has the Trump Organization's case. This judge, who was supposed to be given these cases, or the cases were supposed to be distributed anonymously, somehow found all three of them, and he's set to try Steve Bannon right after Donald Trump. So I don't know how that would happen if that's already the trial posture for the summer. It would seem to me impossible. But in terms of it being what we call reversible error, meaning there's an issue of law that was so blatantly unconstitutional the whole case gets reversed, I think it's littered with reversible error, from the jury instruction that we just talked about to the actual indictment itself about bootstrapping a federal issue to a misdemeanor at the state level just to raise it to a felony, and then whether or not this jurisdictional office at the DA's has the ability to prosecute this case, or just three of them. But as we talked about, those issues will take 2 to 3 years on appeal to litigate. All these guys care about is a misinformation headline that Donald Trump is a convicted felon for the next 4 months to run that tape out in the court of public opinion.
Speaking of Kash Patel, who was a member of the Trump DOD, he was acting chief of staff at the Pentagon when Trump was in office, and Kash, and also former federal prosecutor. Kash, if the situation here turns into a guilty verdict, what do you think they're going to do?
I mean, if the situation turns into a guilty verdict and this judge does not allow Donald Trump to what we call stay out of custody pending appeal, then I think that any jail time that is put upon Donald Trump is going to cause the American public to, rightly so, have a reaction that sends Donald Trump to the White House basically overnight. I know the election's far away, but I think that's what's going to be the reaction. At least that's what I've observed when I've been in and around the courtroom and around the country when I talk to people about what if Donald Trump's in prison in this matter. And Americans not only don't have the stomach for that, Americans don't want to see the weaponized system of justice decide for them who they get to vote for on Election Day come November 5th. So this judge would be wise to allow Donald Trump to do everything he's been doing pending the course of appeal. But again, we've seen what this judge has done, one unconstitutional act at a time, so you have no idea what he's going to do, because he's in it for the prosecution, he's in it for the Democrats, and he's in it for his daughter to make some more money while he churns out this disinformation campaign from his courtroom.
Gosh, how nervous do you think the prosecution is right now, as we're now coming up on 8 or 9 hours of deliberation? Do you think they expected to get a guilty verdict faster than this? Do you think as this time continues to grow, questions get asked, that they get more nervous about the idea of this being a hung jury? How would you take us into their mind so far as you could?
Yeah, from a prosecutorial standpoint in this case, with a judge who is basically on your team, I would have expected a prosecution within the hour based upon the exclusion of all evidence of innocence. So remember, when the judge excluded evidence, that was outside the presence of the jury. You and I have talked and read about it, but the jury doesn't even know about half of Bob Costello's testimony or the legal expert that President Donald Trump wanted to bring in about campaign finance law that would have exonerated Donald Trump. They have had a limited scope of information. So even with that limited scope of information, they're sitting back there saying, wait a second, we're in day 2, and the prosecutor's got to be freaking out a little bit because they've already returned with questions that directly speak to the elements of the crimes charged and questions about the burden of proof. To me, that shows that they are considering across the board whether or not the prosecutors have met their burden of proof. So if I were the prosecutors in this case, I'd be a little scared, and the longer it goes on, I think it inures to the benefit of President Trump.
Kash, again, a timeline question, having been in the role of federal prosecutor yourself. Do you think that Jack Smith, sorry, switching gears here, I know we're all waiting for the New York City verdict, but do you think that Jack Smith is going to try to at least begin the January 6th D.C.-based trial before the election, or is it just functionally impossible for him to do so?
Well, right now, what we call it is he and Judge Chutkan are seized of jurisdiction. The presidential immunity, presidential privilege question is before the United States Supreme Court. So they can't even issue a scheduling order or request the judge issue a scheduling order because they do not have the authority under the law with the case at the Supreme Court to do anything at the trial level. Should the court return a decision this summer, which I think they will in June or July, remember, that whole clock restarts, and they have to take the case based at the direction of the Supreme Court's decision. And then the defense is going to, rightfully so, file motions to dismiss the case outright or a number of charges based on the Supreme Court's decision. So I just don't see it getting there, and this is why I think everyone's so focused on Alvin Bragg. It was the last case anyone cared about because they thought Georgia would come in first. They thought Washington, D.C. would come in first. They thought Florida would come in first. But now they see that through the exposition of all the unconstitutional acts in those cases collectively, their last straw is New York. And I think that's what they're putting all their eggs in one basket for.
What else do you think we should know about this case that we haven't asked you? What should be top of mind? We're talking about the New York City case in particular here. As this jury deliberation continues, what do you want our audience to know?
You know, as a former officer of the court who's been on both sides of this thing, I want the audience to think of the following. Do you want constitutional due process to be selectively applied to you and those you love in your community and your family based on your political preferences? Do you want a ruling elite to come down upon you and your community and say, you disagree with how we want to conduct our government, so we are going to prosecute you based on made-up crimes? I think for me, this is the existential judicial question of our time. Anyone who wants to see Donald Trump convicted wants to light our Constitution on fire. And we cannot have that just because you disagree with his political orientation. To me, this is the most important case of our lifetime, and America and the world are watching. We are no longer a standard of beacon of justice if we get this case wrong.
High stakes indeed. He's Kash Patel. We appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll be talking to you again soon.
Thanks, gents. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Do you or a loved one fall into any of these categories? Military, police, fire, EMS, teacher, government, service employee, all of those, federal, state, or city? If the answer is yes, you've got to check out GovX, which offers incredible savings for those who serve our country and our communities. Join today. Already 8 million members. Fast, easy, and free. Just go to govx.com, sign up. Once you're a GovX member, you'll unlock unbeatable discounts from thousands of trusted brands, names you'll recognize like Yeti, Ray-Ban, Benchmade, Garmin, and others. You'll also have access to tickets for live sporting events, music concerts, theme parks, attractions, and more. Best part might be this. Thanks to GovX Gives Back, GovX will donate a portion of every order to nonprofits that serve the military and first responder communities. When you shop on govx.com, your orders make a meaningful impact. So save up to 40% on apparel, footwear, jewelry, watches, camping, hunting gear, so much more. Something for everyone on govx.com. See if you qualify. Visit govx.com, use my name Clay in the shopping cart, and you get an extra $15 off your first order. That's govx.com, my name Clay, for an extra $15 off your first order. govx.com, savings for those who serve.